Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julie Briskman. I am supervisor for the Algonquian District, Loudoun County, Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. Welcome to our 11th town hall. If you missed our town hall last month in the 2021 General Assembly session, you can find that along with other topics we've hosted, including budget, public safety, Pride Month, and more on our Facebook page. We are on Facebook Live right now. And if you have any questions that you want to be considered during our discussion today, you can feel free to post those questions in the feed on Facebook. Today, I am pleased to bring together a group to help us learn more about the county's new Environmental Commission. It was recently created by the Board of Supervisors. These folks include Ashburn District Supervisor Mike Turner, newly appointed Environmental Commission members Scott Emery and Chris Tandy, and Mark Aveney, who works with General Services for the county and staffs the commission. Scott Emery works as the regional director for an engineering consulting firm that specializes in energy efficiency and high performance building consulting. He has broad experience and expertise with respect to renewable energy and energy use in the built environment and has done some work in Richmond on that. Chris Tandy was perfect for sitting on the Environmental Commission because as he is a volunteer environmental activist. He founded 350 Loudoun, a small grassroots climate action group, which advocates for environmental and social justice concerns. And he is now vice president of a climate action group called Loudoun Climate Project. The new Environmental Commission was created earlier this year to advise the board on policies dealing with the environment, sustainability, and the management of energy. Membership varies from Loudoun residents, environmental conservation professionals, subject matter experts, public utility representatives, and even a Loudoun County High School student, which is extremely important because we are going to need the involvement of the next generation to continue progressing our climate and energy goals across the nation, really. We are seeing a lot of momentum behind climate change and climate initiatives from the White House to the State House, regionally and locally. The White House, as I hope everyone watching knows, rejoined the Paris Accord and is investing in our national parks and conservation, reversing some bad trends there, and has announced the 30 by 2030 initiative, which mandates protecting 30% of U.S. lands and oceans by 2030, which is really not that far away. It is among one of the most ambitious and complex goals of this administration because it will definitely require local coordination. In Virginia, we passed the Virginia Clean Economy Act, marking the beginning of climate action for our state, and we became the first Southern state to enter into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Governor Northam also instituted the Climate Justice Forum. Lastly, we are now part of the Northeastern Transportation Climate Initiative, in which an MOU commits participants to reduce emissions by 20% to 25% between 2022 and 2032. Again, not a lot of time. We really have to get to work on these things. This is all very important because Virginia is a Dillon Rule state and we cannot act necessarily independently as a county on many of these initiatives. And then we come to the regional level, where Loudoun County has committed through the Metro Washington Council of Governments to its 2030 Climate and Energy Action Plan. And it was one of the first approved by the Global Covenant of Mayors. COG also adjusted the regional emissions reduction goals to 50% below the 2005 output by 2030. Beginning to hear a theme here about 2030, and has made adjustments through the Transportation Planning Board to fund projects that meet environmental standards. That's all to say that there's a lot going on, and hopefully our new Environmental Commission can sort some of these priorities out and make sure that we do everything that we can do at the local level to meet these ambitious goals. Because there is literally no time to waste. We must act now. The duties of the Environmental Commission include identifying issues and proposing recommendations to protect, preserve, conserve, and enhance the environment, advancing environmental justice policies to ensure equity across all populations, especially minority, low-income, and historically underserved communities, and acting on priority initiatives identified in the Loudoun County Comprehensive Plan and the board's strategic plan. As I said, before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. Some questions have been pre-submitted. And again, if you'd like to ask a question, feel free to submit it or to enter it in the chat. And also, if we don't get to your question today, you can email my legislative aide, Zachary Harris, and that's zachary.harris@loudoun.gov, and we'll follow up with you and or connect you to folks that can answer your questions. So with all of that, let's get started. I'll start with Supervisor Mike Turner. Mike Turner played an integral role in writing the Environmental Commission's bylaws. And Mike, I'd love to hear what were your main goals during this process and what challenges did you encounter?
Well, thanks, Julie. The main goals of the Environmental Commission, it was originally proposed and put into being basically by Chair Randall in the last board session. And I was tasked to actually begin to draft the bylaws and pull this together. And one thing you learn on the Board of Supervisors is you need to be collaborative with the other supervisors, or you're kind of spinning your wheels, because you can get way down the road and suddenly get voted down and you're back to square one. So the purpose of the Environmental Commission is to begin to field all the potential initiatives and ideas and wonderful innovative thought processes going on in the county right now around the environment, around sustainable energy, and get a group of experts together who can sort through all of those and do some triage and prioritization and make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, basically saying this is very parallel, for example, to the Unmet Housing Needs Strategic Plan, exactly the same process they're going through. So we needed a body of experts to sit and sort through all of these and make recommendations to the board about what we need to do right now, what is easy to do, what's important to do, and come up with some prioritization. Critical to the process was getting the inputs from all the other supervisors. So it was an open invitation to the other supervisors, and generally we communicate staff to start off with. So that's how we did this. And so we began to draft some bylaws for what it might look like. We had just created the Zoning Ordinance Committee bylaws, and so we all had some experience on that process. And the underpinning of the Environmental Commission, one of the things I think Supervisor Briskman will probably agree to, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but when I came on board, I was very surprised that the advisory committees tended to be a popularity contest among the supervisors. They went out and picked their favorite person to be on whatever committee it was, regardless of their experience or their expertise or their academic background. And so they tended to be very political, and they tend to be really not impactful in many ways. Now, some of those, that's fine. You just want to have a discussion among community members. But with the Zoning Ordinance Committee, and I think we all agreed with the Environmental Commission, we were going to be dealing with such weighty ideas and concepts that we really needed expertise. So our goal was to not make it unwieldy. The magic number is 15. That's what staff said. You have an advisory commission of about 15 people, and give or take, then you're in the ballpark. And you want to be functional. So along the template of the Zoning Ordinance Committee, we wanted to create subject matter experts, a body of subject matter experts in a number of different disciplines. And we also wanted specific communities to be represented. So we have someone with college academic experience, a professor, for example. We have a high school student. We have 3 at-large citizen members who may belong to local environmental groups. If you go to the website, loudoun.gov, and just Google Environmental Commission, or just Google Loudoun Environmental Commission, the bylaws will pop up. And attached to the bylaws is a roster, just to give you a sampling of people that we look for. We have subject matter experts, or SMEs. We felt the data centers had to have a seat on the commission because the data centers are such a pervasive influence and such large consumers of water and energy in our county. So they have a dedicated seat. We have a subject matter expert who's an engineer with LEED and environmentally energy efficient buildings. We have a subject matter expert, SME, on clean transportation, one on sustainable energy. And so we have a series of subject matter experts. So the board has to approve who they are, but they are subject matter experts in specific fields so that we have a broad spectrum in the Environmental Commission. Something different that we did, and I don't want to get into my any future discussion, but we also created permanent standing subcommittees on areas that we thought were going to need a special deep dive into specific areas, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But so the staff put together the draft bylaws. We talked quite a bit, and then the key is you're kind of continuously putting together what we think the bylaws are, but you have to get constant feedback from the supervisors. Are you okay with this or not okay with this? We did some informal surveys as to what ought to be in and what not ought to be in. And then you bring the draft before the board and you hope you get 5 of the 9 votes to say, yeah, these are good draft bylaws. And we did very well. I think these passed fairly overwhelmingly. So really the key is representation of a bunch of different subject matter experts, and then and something that the board collaboratively agrees with. And we've got a 6-3 board, 6 Democrats, 3 Republicans. So anytime we do something this momentous, we want it to be bipartisan if at all possible, and this certainly was.
Thanks so much for that description, Supervisor Turner. And it's interesting. You mentioned that, you know, I think both of us were sort of overwhelmed at the beginning of our terms with the committees and commissions and advisory boards and the role they play, maybe an outsized role in some areas, and few conflicts of interest maybe. So actually, as an aside, I'm going to be chairing a committee on commissions, boards, and advisory boards coming up. So you mentioned that there were going to be 2 standing committees, but also I wanted you to share a little bit about one of the first priorities, I believe, of the Environmental Commission, and that's the energy plan. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, why we need to sort of take another look at the energy plan?
Yeah, it was a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. The county energy strategy was written in 2009. It was a nationally award-winning energy strategy. It was lauded all over the country as a really model community energy strategy. I reviewed it in preparation for this meeting, and I had read it some years ago when I ran the first time for this office, and I read it again, and it is amazing how outdated it has become since 2009. So it's 12 years ago. It talks about one of its principal objectives is combined heat and power using natural gas, which is it doesn't even reference clean natural gas, which is an option we have today that they didn't even know about back then. It makes no mention of community choice aggregation. It makes no mention of solar power purchase agreements. It references slightly electric vehicles and says there's a good indication that electric vehicles are going to become a real widespread possibility in the near future. And so we really want to take a look at electric vehicle infrastructure. It clearly did not anticipate how widespread electric vehicles would be 12 years later. And so I made the comment to the group here right before we got on. The way we wrote the board member initiative, we wanted it to be updated. I think the consultant is going to look at it for about 10 minutes and go, we can't update this. We need to start over from scratch and come up with a 2021 energy strategy. And the reason we need to do that is for just the reason we thought of. There is so much going on in the sustainable energy environment that we need focus, we need direction, and a county energy strategy, a thoughtful, coherent energy strategy will tend to focus the community. And one of the important things in environmental, particularly in sustainable energy, is that the technology and the innovative engineering is moving so fast that one of your big challenges is keeping your public informed of what's going on. And that's our responsibility as the board. The Environmental Commission job is to get into the granular detail of what these initiatives are, what they mean, and how best to move forward. It's the board's job to make the priority decisions, but then also to sell it to their constituents so they understand it. So you can anticipate a lot of our town halls coming up over the next 2 to 3 years are going to be about the new Environmental Commission work, because that's where the public's interest is. And so, yeah, it does need to be, it doesn't need to be updated. I think it needs to be completely overhauled.
Thank you for that. Yes, and I completely agree. And some of the things that we talked about probably with Chris and with Scott during my campaign was the fact that the energy plan didn't have sort of accountability and reporting and all those sorts of things. So it'll be good to, you know, sort of set goals, have accountability, measure things, right? What gets measured gets improved, right? As the old adage goes. I'm going to call a little bit of an audible here since we're still talking a little bit about process, and go to Mark, if that's okay with you guys. Mark, the county is so fortunate to have staff with considerable expertise such as yourself. in preparing for this town hall, I found out that we have a new assistant director for stormwater and public works division, and that is you, Mark. Mark, what does that mean, and how are you planning to work with the Environmental Commission? And if you could tell us a little bit about, how the meetings are going to go and what you're finding out about some of the priorities.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. So I'm honored to be involved in this process, especially starting out at the very beginning. I think that's great. And I have a lot of background in the past working as an extension agent with farmers, with minority farmers, with landscapers, doing a lot of public outreach and education, as well as stormwater management in other localities. So I'm excited to work now with my skills on this. We have 17 members. They added a few, I think, Supervisor Turner, since you last checked, and it's a very broad representation of the community. We have representation from all of our utilities, from the data centers, as was mentioned, from activists, from more academics, college professors. It's a very, very broad perspective. And what I've been doing is calling all of the members, and I've spoken with Chris and I've spoken with Morris, and I'm glad to see them in person. And I've been asking them about themes relative to the two subcommittees that were mentioned by Supervisor Turner of sustainable energy and natural resources. And I've got a list that I'll share at some point. I'm still kind of cleaning it up a little bit. But I would think to talk about process, which was Supervisor Briskman's comment, I think we're going to need to focus and look and do a deep dive on some of these issues, which are a little complex. Let's be honest. Some of these things are going to require some research, such as green banks and community choice, energy policies, solar arrays, whether you allow them or whether you don't. We haven't talked a lot about natural resource issues, but some of the comments I'm getting have to do with incentives for developers, how we preserve more open space when we develop, regulations that we might have for data centers, how we do a better job with water quality for Goose Creek, Catoctin Creek, all of our watersheds. So our first meeting is going to be July 21st. It will be totally virtual. It will be 6 p.m. to 8:30. It is on the county's website. I think that was mentioned. Anybody listening who's interested in the Environmental Commission should go to the main Loudoun County website and enter in Environmental Commission. You will find the roster. You will find some meeting notes. There aren't any there now because we haven't met, but you'll find all our information there, as well as links and how to participate. The first meeting, we're going to talk about freedom of information, conflict of interest, all those important things, and we're going to elect a chair and a vice chair. Because although I may be the liaison, my job is to support, and my job is to do everything before the meeting and after the meeting. But during the meeting, that's going to be run by the chair and the vice chair, much like a board meeting is run. So I think it's going to be real important that we get an agenda that's pretty tight so we don't go far afield. But the first meeting, as I said, in July will be mainly administrative and elect of a chair and a vice chair. The second meeting, and I think we do need to meet every 2 weeks because, as was mentioned, the bylaws are pretty specific. The board wants action. The board does not just want a lot of talk and feel good. They want us, this commission, to come back to them with some initiatives that they could decide to move forward with. So we've got our work to do. So the second meeting, I think I'm just going to let the members talk because it is a fairly accomplished group. And I think with any new group, it's good to just let everybody have, 15 minutes and talk about who they are, what they do, what they're interested in, just so we all get to know each other. And then by the third meeting, I'm actually looking to try to narrow things down, use the subcommittee that have been put in place by Supervisor Turner to kind of focus on some of these initiatives. And I can mention just a few that I've heard. So we do a deeper dive. Green banks, which is kind of a financing option to encourage businesses to look at some environmentally sustainable ideas with the support of financial support, I guess, from the county. Solar arrays, where they should go, where they shouldn't go. There's been a lot of farming people that have been approached about having solar arrays. There's been homeowners associations that have been asking whether they can make it easier to do. We've been looking at distributed generation, green roofs on data centers, HOA issues, carbon neutral by 2030. How do we do it? What is our energy usage in Loudoun? Can we get some statistics and look at who the big users are? And then as far as natural resources, looking at incentives for for developers, some habitat protection, endangered species identification, where they are, list of impacts to water quality from data centers, list of impacts to water quality from new housing construction. And then some other things that are important for the commission, which include public input at every meeting. So we're going to have the public come during citizens' time and talk about what they think about these issues as well as additional issues. So we need to manage that. And then we're also running an awards program. So we're going to be recognizing businesses and residents who've kind of gone above and beyond, and we need to develop some criteria for that as well. So we've got a lot of things to do. And as Supervisor Turner mentioned, there's an energy strategy, which is a bit outdated. And I think the Environmental Commission can certainly have a good role in updating that and looking at what the desire of the board is. So we've got a lot of work to do, and we're excited to get about doing it.
That is ambitious, meeting every 2 weeks, but I do think it's important, as I said at the top. We really don't have a lot of time. And I'm going to be really glad to get some, actionable initiatives from the Environmental Commission because, like I said at the top, we hear all these things even from the Biden administration, from the state, from COG. And I sit there as a supervisor and say, okay, but what can I do? What can we do? What can I do locally? So do you know how often is the Environmental Commission supposed to be reporting to the board, or has that been decided? And I don't know if you or Mike would need to answer that.
I believe in the bylaws, it says we will do an annual report and we will report back to the board at least annually.
Okay, but that doesn't stop the Environmental Commission from coming or coming to us with an initiative or going through a supervisor for a BMI. A BMI, for those who don't know, is sort of a local initiative for local legislation kind of thing. That wouldn't stop something from like that from happening in between the annual meetings, would it?
No, I could take that one, Mark.
Okay.
That's exactly right, Julie. That's how I envision it. I would like to see them hitting us regularly with recommendations for BMI. I mean, I would like them to become a board member initiative factory where they got the template, they know what they want to do, they fire it up, and we got any takers on the board and just let us sign up for them. So
Find
I mean,
sponsors, let's do it.
yeah, really. I think we can dispense with a lot of really good ideas fairly quickly because they're easy to implement. They're not going to cost anything. They're just good ideas, and let's get them done. And so I would expect them to fire those things to us on a fairly regular basis.
Great, awesome. Thanks so much, Mark. I'm going to turn to Scott at this point. Scott, you've been a longtime champion of energy efficiency and your work with an engineering consultant a firm that specializes in energy efficiency and high performance building. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you hope to accomplish as a member of the commission. And by the way, thank you for being appointed from Algonquian District.
Well, thank you for championing that, Supervisor Briskman. And I guess just to give a little bit of background, I don't want to go too much into background, but it's perhaps worth sharing where I'm coming from, my perspective. And I was just recently in a conversation where I realized that 15 years ago this month, I was sent for about a 3-week trip to Germany. I was working for Rehau, which is one of our big, loud employers in Leesburg. And my mission, or part of my mission there, was to review technology in Germany related to our renewable and clean energy portfolio of products to look at what can we bring to the North American market. Now, the economics were very different in the mid-2000s than they are today, and different things were driving it. But, that was really my first I was aware of climate change and the environmental issues, but that was a company that was building a business targeting that and looking at the business case for those products and services. And that led my career down a path which at one point had me working as a geothermal consultant for both geothermal power and geothermal heating and cooling. And I was on the board of a group in Richmond that was called the Virginia Alternative and Renewable Energy Association. It was an industry association that was essentially a lobbying group to lobby Richmond for legislation on clean energy policy at the time. And again, it was coming at it from the business angle and how do we create economic opportunity in Virginia. And I was, that was kind of a little bit short-lived when the politics in Richmond changed. A lot of that legislation was dead in the water. And so then you flash forward to 2017, and after the 2017 election, the dynamics in Richmond changed, but I hadn't heard a lot during the election season about clean energy. And so I'm like, well, let's start talking about it. And so that really accelerated, besides my work, because I'm working in the field, that accelerated my interest in that policy there. And I believe there was a second part to your question. I want to make sure I got that. So that's kind of my background. And I work in that field, energy efficiency, sustainability. I do a lot of work in DC where there's some really progressive laws. And so I'm learning a lot from what they're doing, also Montgomery County and everything like that. But anyway, you had a second.
Oh, I did. And I know you and I have talked about this offline, but and I think I might know the answer, but what would you like to see the Environmental Commission champion from your perspective? Maybe one of your highest priorities.
You know, I think what I really see as happening in places where I see action taking is there's a very well established goal, objective, and then a framework that I see there. And I think, you know, this conversation is illustrating how many different opportunities there are for us to move the ball forward in this field. And it can get overwhelming. It's like going to the grocery store and there's 50 varieties of apple. How do you pick which apple to take, right? So I think one of what I would like to see accomplished is that we have some real clear vision that we can help the board create that's implementable and executable, and that it ultimately ends up with a robust solution that is going to get us to that goal, which I personally think, you know, is got to be carbon neutral by the middle of the century. We'll talk more about that later. But at a minimum, that's got to be where we're going. But that's there's a complex pathway to get there. So I think I see that as what I hope we can come out of this with, is that as an engineer and someone who's done a lot of strategic planning, is that we really have something executable. We take what was an award-winning plan from 2009 and help the process of replacing it with something that, you know, really addresses the current 2021 situation and allows us to put things in place that are moving us forward quickly and not, let's say, just nice ideas. So that's what I see is what I want to hope we accomplish, and where I hope I can contribute, because I've done a lot of planning and, you know, including helping planning with the church, planning on the business and things like that. So.
Well, I know that you can contribute a lot. And actually this is a little bit off script, but can you, Scott, tell us what is the difference between, you know, being carbon neutral and or like some of the other goals we've heard about reducing emissions by a certain percentage?
Wow, that's a tough question.
Sorry.
Because there's so many different definitions out there, but fundamentally,
Right, that's part of the problem, isn't it?
Yeah. But fundamentally, from a, you know, climate change standpoint, carbon neutral, and maybe even that's too narrow because it's really greenhouse gas emission neutral is where we need to get to. But carbon neutral essentially means that we're not putting any net carbon into the environment. The reality is that our technologies, we can decarbonize a lot of things, but there's a lot of things where we can't necessarily get to 100%. So then we have to do some type of offset. There's different strategies like carbon capture at facilities. So we talk about heavy manufacturing where maybe they can't decarbonize as easily. They're going to have to, that doesn't apply to Loudoun per se. But also when I look at, like, say in DC, when they're looking at talking about carbon neutral, they are looking at things like, well, you can't put enough solar on a large office building to give it 100% of its energy or get to carbon neutral. So then you have to look at other ways to account for that. So you would have off-site production, or when you look at the UN program, most of the pathways to the future include carbon capture, which again is outside our scope, but those are things the federal government's looking at. And those are big things that, so the idea is what the science tells us is by the middle of the century, we need to be carbon neutral, meaning we're not putting any net carbon into the atmosphere if we're going to hold that 1.5 degree Celsius. And more importantly, in terms of these 2030, 2032 goals, we've got to really turn that ship around. If you look at the data, what it says is we're continuing to increase how much carbon we're putting in the atmosphere globally. We've got to stop that by 2030, 2031, and it's got to be headed very quickly in the other direction.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
so those are the, that's hopefully helpful. I know it's a lot.
So reducing emissions is sort of something that would contribute to being carbon neutral. So it's not like the only end all be all, right?
Well, reducing emissions is really the key part there, reducing the carbon emissions in the first place. So replacing things, reducing how much energy we use up front as an efficiency type measure means we need less energy, there's less emissions. And then for the energy we use, using clean sources, solar, wind, whatever other sources we have. And so, there's different pieces that have to come together to get us there. And that's a big part of the challenge.
Okay. Huh, interesting. Well, thank you. I am going to move on to Mr. Tandy now, and I think I'll be coming back to Scott and to Supervisor Turner with some other questions as we see what's coming along on the feed. But Chris, you were appointed to a seat set aside for an environmental group representing underrepresented populations. And I'll just mention, in January 2020, Governor Northam issued the EO 29 establishing the Virginia Environmental Justice Council. And this past spring, legislators voted to establish this council as a permanent body with 27 positions under the Secretary of Natural Resources. So we should remain positive, hopefully, that the state and local jurisdictions are now considering environmental justice in their strategies. So, Chris, can you tell us what organization are you a part of, or organizations, plural perhaps, and how does your role fit into the rest of the Environmental Commission's work?
Sure. Yeah, and thank you, Supervisor Briskman and Supervisor Turner, for having me here. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to be on the commission. I'm currently the vice president of Loudoun Climate Project. That climate group came out of a merger of two previous groups, 350 Loudoun and Sustainable Loudoun. Minor correction to your introduction there. I previously co-chaired 350 Loudoun, but I was not a founder of it.
Okay.
I would hate to misrepresent that. No, not a problem at all. We 350 Loudoun did a lot of pipeline work. We bused Loudoners to Union Hill in Buckingham County. And that community was founded by formerly enslaved people that is still largely African American, including many descendants of those original founders. And we were busing people back there when Dominion was trying to put a very large compressor station in this very definition of an environmental justice community. That compressor station got canceled, but today Loudoun Climate Project still works on pipeline issues and other environmental justice stuff, and is a Green New Deal Virginia coalition partner. Green New Deal Virginia having a very large EJ and social justice component. I've been a member of NAACP Loudoun, want to make sure I get that right, since 2017, and a co-founder and current board member of People Power Virginia, which is a nonpartisan PAC that works to support candidates that are helping us stop major fossil fuel projects like the Loudoun County pipeline, or the Loudoun County pipeline, the Mountain Valley pipeline.
Don't say Loudoun County pipeline.
No, we're not going to have them. I've worked on my HOA board for about 5 years, up until literally yesterday when I resigned it to free up time for work on the Environmental Commission. So hopefully I can, I know a little bit about how HOAs work with the county government. More recently, I've joined New Virginia Majority's Housing Justice Strategy Working Group and working with them to try to get more equitable housing policies and foster cooperation between conservationists and affordable housing advocates. There's potentially some overlap in my previous work in the Environmental Commissions. One thing Loudoun Climate Project is working on is building an air quality monitoring network. And that's one area where I'm thinking maybe the EC might be able to do some air monitoring itself. As to how all of that fits in, I figure I'm someone that's worked with grassroots groups and hopefully have a decent understanding of what needs to be done in the county, and hopefully can help find common ground and build collaboration between the commission and local environmental groups.
So are you encouraged by what's been happening in Richmond now?
Yeah, yes, and on some things, yes, and some things, no. I'm not familiar with Executive Order 29, but I made a note of that. I'm going to go look it up. There was, I thought, some good stuff in the CEA, and then there was some stuff that was kind of inadequate. You know, it's like it's kind of like everything else in sort of environmentalism and climate. It's uh, progress is great, and some progress has been made, but we absolutely have to do more.
Do you think that Loudoun County needs to identify sort of environmental justice, as you said, communities as part of the Environmental Commission work?
Yes.
Short answer, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have ideas on any of that yet, or do you think it'll just be worked through in the commission?
It's. I think we need to do some data gathering. I'm looking. I really want to see the next census data when that comes out.
Mhm, mhm. Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, I think we need to do some data gathering. We kind of need to know what pollution sources we have here. What we need to kind of know where underrepresented communities are in relation to pollution sources. And you know, I'm sure we'll get into this later, but it's not just pollution sources. You know, we need to know where underrepresented communities are, how they might have sort of compounding disadvantages, and be prepared for, you know, some unfortunate negative outcomes that, you know, we're gonna have as temperatures increase and we have increased extreme weather events and things like that. I mean, some of this stuff is inevitable at this point.
Right, right. Another thing that I also sit on NVRC, and they recently put together a regional map that shows hot spots and deforestation. So that's definitely something that should probably be included. And I was very interested to see, you know, where Loudoun County, you know, showed up on that map or didn't show up on that map. And especially as we've grown so fast, you know, we outstripped a lot of our ability to think about these things, I think, in Loudoun County because we grew so fast. So I'll be really interested to see what you find. Um, Coming back to you, Supervisor Turner, I have my next question for you is supposed to be about the standing committees on sustainable energy and natural resources, but I think you kind of covered that. If you didn't, maybe cover it a little bit more. And then we had another question come in about what stakeholder groups are represented on the commission. So maybe you could cover both of those, please.
Sure. So very briefly, hang on, I'm calling up the makeup of the committee, so I have it right in front of me. The two standing committees are sustainable energy and environmental protection. And as we put the commission together, we realized sustainable energy is really a genre all to itself. It's a sector all to itself. And there's so much going on in it that we wanted to make sure that the Environmental Commission had direction that you have to have a group of experts focused on sustainable energy. And then the same was true with the environment. There are so many initiatives related to the environment, particularly in Loudoun County, where we're concerned about the total maximum daily load into the Chesapeake and those limits. And we have several scenic rivers and waterways that are, all of ours are impaired. They're all impaired. There's a lot of environmental issues in Loudoun County that continue to come up. And so we wanted two dedicated committees. We originally anticipated that those two permanent subcommittees would be formed by the Environmental Commission, and they would just form them on their own. And we made no requirement that the Board of Supervisors had to approve those. We got pushback from one or more members of the board saying, no, the Board of Supervisors ought to approve the members of the standing subcommittee. Well, that can get pretty cumbersome and with turnover and that sort of thing. So the compromise we worked out was the bylaws state that a majority, the standing subcommittees can be no more, or standing committees can be no more than 15 members, and the majority of the members must be sitting members of the Environmental Commission. So if you have 15 members, 8 of them have to be Environmental Commission members, and the chair of the committees have to be a member of the Environmental Commission. But once the Environmental Commission is formed, they have the latitude to pull in subject matter experts And I think the bylaws say up to 6 subject matter experts, and then additional members of citizens at large, if they want to, not to exceed 7 for a total of 15. Onto the commission, they can bring them on, but they have to nominate them to the Board of Supervisors, and the Board of Supervisors then has to approve those non-environmental commission members for the committee. So there is some control, but it was a reasonable compromise, we thought. And then regarding your question about the stakeholders groups that are on the Environmental Commission, so we have 1 slot for a member of an environmental conservation organization. We have 1 spot that is a member of an environmental organization that represents, supports underrepresented populations. That's Chris's slot. We have a Loudoun County Public Schools Energy and Environment Team Manager. The 3 public utilities, electric, gas, and water, are all represented. We thought it was important they have a seat at the table. And then within the other subject matter expert slots, you can also have, we have a member of a collegiate faculty specializing in environmental issues. And so we've got 1 slot that's dedicated to natural resources and water quality, so a water expert. And a lot of these people come from our activist groups that are in our community. We have a subject matter expert spot for an environmental planner. Well, there's a lot of environmental planners, and invariably they're involved with some of our environmental stakeholder groups in the community. So it's a fairly broad brush, and I think we made a good effort to include a fairly disparate group of subject matter experts and local activist organizations and citizens at large that have a special interest.
Thank you for that. Another question just came in, Turner, and we can get back to it if probably know the bylaws state that the Environmental Commission has to work on initiatives that are in the comp plan. Initiatives that the Environmental Commission will be looking at, or should we get back on that?
No, I would have to go into the detailed wording on the comp plan, but the comp plan, remember, is a broad template. It's a guide. And the language, all the language I've seen around this in the comprehensive plan is broad enough and non-specific enough to pretty much open the book and say, you need to be focused on environmental issues, and there's broad categories. I'm fairly confident the Environmental Commission makeup and the taskings that we've got so far more than meet the requirements of the comprehensive plan. I don't have the comprehensive plan language right in front of me, but it's pretty broad. It's pretty much of a guideline, and I think we've easily satisfied that requirement.
Gotcha. I don't can have this conversation without talking centers. Supervisor Turner mentioned data centers a little bit earlier. I wanted to go to summary on this. Data centers, county, they support this, but can you talk a little bit about their impact on the and if we should be concerned about centers' energy use in the county or more broadly?
Sure. Well, I think, fundamentally data centers are, they're big users of energy. That's their primary cost expense to run a data center once it's built is the electricity that's used to run it. They also have to have significant backup power generation because they have to stay up all the time. A lot of that generation is done with diesel or maybe natural gas generators as backup. So those are concerned when they're being run and they're burning fossil fuels and whatnot. There are opportunities there. I mean, first off, I would say there's some really interesting work. If actually Google has a really interesting podcast about data centers. If you listen to them, they're very focused on reducing their energy use because that's one of their biggest expenses. So they really have motivation, the big players, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, to try to push that energy use down. I don't know there's a lot we can do to regulate that because they're already very motivated as business people to cut that energy use. But we do need to, look at, what can we do to help encourage them, incentivize them to, get access to clean energy. A lot of that will come out of the VCEA. A lot of that is kind of outside of what we can influence because it's it's that electric generation in the first place. You know, our influence on that is going to be enabling things like having broader use of distributed energy resources in the county, meaning solar, storage, maybe thermal, maybe wind. I don't think we're going to get a lot of wind here, but possibly. So, I mean, I see them as a big part of the pie, but it's also an area where we're probably going to find some limitation in how far we can push things, and it's going to be really about how we work together with them to enable them to push the envelope there.
Yeah. I keep, when I think about this, and I think about the basically control that Dominion has in the state, I keep wondering when we're going to see that sort of crossroads between what the big data center owners have as their priorities to use clean energy, reduce their emissions, for lack of, so like the Googles and the Facebooks and the Amazons of the world have these goals, but then they kind of, in Virginia at least, I think, have to get their energy from Dominion. So I keep thinking there's going to be a crossroads or maybe even a conflict somewhere down the road as to how we accomplish their goals while still being sort of subservient may not be the right word, but how do we help them accomplish their goals while we still only have one provider of
I
power?
can speak to that question specifically, but let me circle back just a little bit to some things Scott said. I beg to differ just a little bit. The market mechanism is not causing them to naturally seek to use less energy. It's causing them to seek to be more efficient with the energy they use. So they
Fair enough.
don't mind using a lot more energy. I mean, the standard data center now for the big guys is about 120 megawatts of data center, which is enormous. They are driving, their measure of effectiveness is their power utilization effectiveness, their PUE, and their water use utilization effectiveness. So their PUE right now, standard in the county, is about 1.3. That is, they're 30% inefficient. 1 megawatt of power comes in the front door, and they have to use a megawatt and a third to go out the door to generate that data. They're driving down to 1-to-1. They're looking at submerged data racks, which is much easier to cool with liquid than it is with air. So 1-to-1 power usage efficiency is right around the corner, and the market mechanism is driving them to be more efficient. But as they want to say frequently, look, we can control the power consumption end of it and make it perfectly efficient. Dominion controls transmission, and they have to as a monopolized regulated utility. What we have some latitude with is power generation. Where do they get their power from? And in conversations with the data centers, they will tell you, we can only get our power from Dominion. We are held hostage to Dominion. We don't want to get into a fight with Dominion because they control all our power, and power is our life's blood. The water usage, Amazon has announced in a public announcement just the other day, they're going to 100% reclaimed water. So the market mechanism is driving them to be very efficient. The one that they can't control is, where does the power come from? That's why community choice aggregation is so important to me. We go out as a county and hire a third-party provider, and they go on to the East Coast sustainable energy market, and they find sustainable energy to bring into the transmission lines, bringing it into Loudoun County. So suddenly, if for that group, and we could restrict it just to the data centers, or we can make it available to the average consumer, all of a sudden the data centers we can write it into the contract. We want 30%, 40%, 50% of the power that comes into Loudoun County to be sustainable energy from the sustainable energy market. And these are not renewable energy credits. We're not just buying credits. This is actual sustainable energy coming into the county. If we do that, I guarantee the data centers will flock to that new mousetrap.
Interesting.
They will flock to it. So that's why setting up now, to your point, Julie, exactly. The instant we get serious about standing up a robust community choice aggregation model in Loudoun County, Dominion Power is going to wake up and go, whoa, 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 wait a minute, because suddenly they're not a monopoly anymore. And so that's when it's going to get really tricky. Our consultant that we just hired is looking at the legal basis. Arlington has a model for a CCA, but they have not stood it up yet. So our consultant is going to look at the Commonwealth legal basis by which we can create a community choice aggregation model. Right now, the law says only Dominion is subject to it, the monopolized
Okay.
utilities. Novec isn't even subject to it. So we want to change that to make them subject to it. So lots of opportunity. Data centers will flock to that if we can stand it up, but we got to stand it up.
That was going to be my next question to you. Can we, as you know, as a county, can we do that because we're a Dillon Rule state? Do we need legislative approval to get that done? And I'm going to go to you in just a second, Chris, but Mike, do we need to do anything at the Richmond level in order to do a CCA?
I just submitted a proposal to, well, two things. I haven't submitted the second proposal, but now I will because it's becoming obvious that we need to. The first one is a modification to the Richmond law, the code, that prevents Dominion and Novec from using taxpayer dollars to lobby against community choice aggregation. That's number one, because there's a loophole there right now. They can use our dollars to launch a massive television campaign against community choice aggregation. The second one is right now, Virginia code allows the creation of a community choice aggregation model to stand up, but only to, I believe the code is only to replace energy from a monopolized utility, which would be only Dominion. So it does not allow a community choice aggregation model to compete against a cooperative like Novec. So the proposed legislation change would now wrap Novec underneath the same umbrella that Dominion is under to allow us to use and set up a community choice aggregation. It's pretty complex, and so I don't know if we can push it through, but that is a code change that we're already looking at.
Interesting. Okay. I can't wait to see, and I can't wait to support. Chris, did you have any comments on, I do want to have one more question with you about our disadvantaged communities, but did you have any comments about all of the discussion we just had? I think you might. Oops, you're on mute.
I'm actually really excited to get into the EJ question. And
Okay.
I've got a lot on that.
So we talked a little bit about you know, the inequities that exist, and you know, and everything, and climate change is no exception. According to Princeton University, Black Americans are 75% more likely than to live near facilities that produce odor, emissions, noise, light, and other environmental contaminants. It's no coincidence that 13.4% of Black children suffer from asthma compared to just over 7% for white children. So Chris, as for on our committee, how do you plan to address the effects of climate change on historically underrepresented? We've got
So
minutes. No pressure.
I'll try to be as quick as I can. But
I'm kidding. Take your
this is
time.
kind of the $1 million question for this role. The question sets up the answer pretty well. When we're talking about environmental justice, we're talking about compounding disadvantages, and we're talking about racism as well as discrimination more broadly, as environmental justice seeks to address environmental discrimination. Climate change absolutely is an environmental justice issue because of these compounding disadvantages. So first thing is how we talk about this stuff, that we need to acknowledge that climate change is an EJ issue. It comes out of America's shameful legacy of extraction that shares so many characteristics with America's shameful legacy of racism. Folks in the climate movement now broadly know, and I say now because there's some fair criticism that we didn't always, broadly now know that these things are inseparable. We can't achieve adequate or lasting progress on climate change if we ignore racism and other social justice concerns along the way. And I think this is why this Juneteenth, you saw Sierra Club recently announce support for reparations. To quote Michael Brune, it's up to us to build an intersectional climate justice movement. So next, we talked a little bit about taking an inventory of pollution sources, inventory of underserved communities. I should probably point out that when you talk about building lists of people, given the US's history of redlining and other disenfranchisement, I can understand why some might be skeptical. So it's probably important to point out that we need to do this in a very dignified way. We need to do it in a way that's respectful to people. And this is kind of why I want to go out and talk to people. I want to, listen to people that are directly affected in these communities. So I'll be making an effort to go and do in-person meetings with people. It's going to be a bit of a balancing act, that part, because we need to make sure we're not burdening the same communities that have these disadvantages with having to explain things to us. To climate
Right.
change specifically, do I need to stop for time?
No, agreeing with you.
Oh, thank you. To climate change specifically, we're talking about increased heat and extreme weather events like we talked before, potentially water resource scarcity. I know it seems like we have a lot of water around here right now, but in the future that could change as things heat up. So we need to make sure we're looking out for underrepresented groups that need to have resources and energy security, that they need to handle those outcomes. Which, all of that would be more of a Band-Aid solution if we didn't look at the bigger picture. And I can't overstate this part that, like we've talked about, Loudoun absolutely must do its part to bring down greenhouse gas emissions. If we fail to do that, it would be to inherit an unconscionable debt to future generations. We need to be looking at impacts to future people. As a segue there, a study of the impact of California heat waves from 1999 to 2011 on infants found that mortality rates were highest for Black infants. So we're talking about a problem that crosses generations. We need to be looking at pollution sources that are outside of Loudoun. If West Virginia is going to allow an insulation factory, for example, right across the border from Loudoun and upwind 10 months out of the year, we need to be able to quantify the pollution impact of that factory on Loudoun's residents. As we're working on transitioning to renewable energy sources, and while that policy work is largely done at the state level, I think there's stuff that can be done at the county level to make sure that it's done in an equitable way, that the energy economy of the future provides opportunities to folks that have traditionally been left out.
I like that. Thank you for that. And I'm happy to hear you recognizing we can't always, we shouldn't always be asking these communities to accept stuff to us over and over again. And I ran into that a little bit on my segregationist and racist symbols effort, in that we shouldn't solely rely on the African Black POCs to tell us what's out there. We should be going and doing the research on our own and figuring it out. To that, I want to ask you, do we have any legacy information? I understand that we once had an environmental department, I think, in the county. A legacy and mission can rely on, aside from our old energy plan, to work from.
I've been,
Sorry,
I've been,
but go ahead, Chris.
oh, sorry, my bad.
No, go ahead. You were going to say something.
I've been trying to find that. I've been trying to look
Okay.
for it, and I haven't found much.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just say, I'm fairly new here, so I'm still looking in the files. There does appear to
Okay.
have been some commissions and groups. There was a groundwater protection group, but a lot of what I see that they did was what I think Supervisor Turner identified. They talked a lot. There wasn't really any actionable items. So it doesn't
Gotcha.
seem to have been that for some reason. Yeah.
Gotcha. And so quickly before we close, can you please remind the public how they might be able to participate I know you mentioned it earlier, but could you just highlight that one more time?
Absolutely. So the official source for information on the Environmental Commission is the official Loudoun County website. Interested people should go to the Loudoun County website, and on the search bar, you can enter in Environmental Commission, and you will get a landing page that shows when we're meeting, how to participate in the meeting, as well as any documents. There are no documents there yet because we haven't met, but that's the official way to find out. You can also, on the calendar feature, I think you can ask to be notified of meetings. So that's not a bad idea to make sure you get a little ping in your inbox that says when meetings are occurring. The first meeting is July 21st, 6 p.m. It will be entirely virtual, and it will probably be pretty boring because we'll be going over freedom of information and conflict of interest, which are important things nonetheless, but we won't really be discussing any substantial kind of policy issues. But residents and anybody
Sure.
that's interested should go to the website there to find that information. Thank you.
Gotcha. And Supervisor Turner, do you have any closing comments? It's end of our hour.
No, I do not. Great town hall. Great topic. Just everyone's pay attention and stay tuned because there's going to be a lot going on around the Environmental Commission that you can get involved with and participate in. It's a great opportunity for community input and to have your voice heard.
Thank you. I mean, I enough about what great work this commission is going to do and hopefully be bringing us lots of actionable initiatives that we can act on at the local level. I'm excited to hear that we're going to be taking some things to Richmond for some change. And I thank you everyone for coming on today for this hour. And this will be stored on Live for anyone to go back and watch. I just wanted to remind everyone, according to the United Nations, the globe has reversible damage from climate change. The Environmental Commission and Supervisor and many of my colleagues on the board are just as committed as I am, making sure that we begin to act and try to resolve some of these issues. So thank you, Environmental Commission member Tandy, Scott Emery. Thank you, Supervisor Turner. Thank you, Mr. Avani, for joining us today. And everyone have a great afternoon. Try to stay dry. We'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks all.
All right. Thank you.
Have a
Good
good one.
afternoon.